Hey everybody, it's Professor Snart checking in as we move from Unit 2 to Unit 3. As you might be able to hear from my voice, I am not feeling terrific. I actually feel better than I sound, but I sound pretty bad. So I'm going to keep this really short. I think it's sort of ironic that this unit actually has us doing some recording of our own here. So I'm conscious of what it feels like to hear your own voice right now. So I'm just going to look at our due dates really quickly before we look at Unit 3. Keeping in mind that we've finished up Unit 2, main work for Unit 2, and then the replies piece can unfold until Friday, so we might want to start working towards Unit 3 Wednesday due date. So again, kind of that overlap that might develop between, say, the tail end of one unit and the beginning of the next one. As we get deeper into our course, too, it's you getting more grades back and that kind of thing. So I'm going to invite you to read or reread the discussion board grading guidelines. They're fairly generic and overarching because so much of what we do, it sort of differs, from unit to unit, and I can't always articulate for every single thing exactly what, a 44 out of 50 versus a 43 out of 50 would be. So generically speaking, right, we have every discussion board set up where there's always going to be a sort of primary post or the introductory work that you're doing, or initial work, I should say, and then, of course, that reply piece. So they both count. And it's not an exact science. So if you're getting the job done, that's kind of it's fairly effective, pretty good. That's where you're ending up. And then the same thing goes for the replies. And then sort of that exemplary, really going above and beyond. And like I try to outline here, the really good discussion board post, almost regardless of content or of the context that it's in, is going to be obviously well articulated and in-depth. And again, this goes for replies too. So it's going to be long, but not just long for the sake of being long, but it's going to be long because what it does is draws together a number of different threads. And those might be from readings, class material, additional research or things that you're bringing in, participants' posts. Pardon me, I should probably stop and start again, but I'm not going to. Again, this is sort of where the different threads that you pull together might change depending on what we're doing for that particular unit, but it's still the same concept of bringing lots of different pieces together. Even if it's multiple parts of, like for a reply, you're not just fixating on one aspect of an initial post or someone's initial work, but you're actually commenting on multiple of those things. And so this is really reserved for that above and beyond situation. And again, effective, barely kind of getting it done, and then the same thing sort of breaks down for replies. They're just not overall worth the same amount of points. Oh my gosh. Okay. The point though that I want to make to people, and I know that it's easy from my side of the grading standard or the grade book, is that our whole course is out of 1,000 points. And so when I grade discussion boards, I don't get as microscopic as, oh, this is a 41 and this is a 39 and this is a 44. Out of 1,000 points, I can't tell you what the difference is between a 0.1% of those points, like a 41 and a 42. So I tend to round up down to 40, 45, maybe a 35, and then that again is where if you've missed a reply or it's really last minute kind of a thing. So if you're consistently getting 40, 45 on those discussion boards, that's good. It's not really going to hurt you in the long run. It's going to add up, but not so significantly that you're looking at a whole letter grade. So always think of the point value as kind of a raw number out of that whole 1,000 points. It doesn't really work if you think, oh, I got a 40 out of 50, that's 80%, or that's a B barely. It really isn't. You can be doing perfectly good work and getting that throughout the whole course, and those points are not going to add up to be, like I said, a whole grade letter difference. Especially because at the end of the day, I don't just let the computer add up the raw numbers. I always look to see what number it produces, and does that really reflect the quality of the work that someone has been doing throughout the whole term. So it doesn't mean that I all of a sudden change a C to an A at the end of the term, but certainly I look at, is there consistently, getting work done? You're always up in that 40-45 range. Are the big projects done well? And so there's always the human element that goes into it too. So keep in mind the grading guidelines, but also I'm not trying to make fractional distinctions between like a 41 out of 50 and a 42 out of 50 when you're thinking really that's like 41 or 1 or 2 points out of a whole 1,000 for our course. So keep that bigger picture in mind. Okay, really quickly. Our next unit then takes us into that traditional form, the sonnet, which just about everyone has run into at some point, probably the Shakespearean sonnet. There's actually two different kinds. There's the Shakespearean or Elizabethan, the English sonnet, and then the Italian or Petrarchan sonnet, named for Petrarch, a little bit like Shakespeare, the primary practitioner of that form. Maybe not its inventor exactly, but he came to be sort of known or equated with it. I'm not going to get too deeply into all the nuances of the sonnet. There's a little slideshow here that you can look at, but it's literally one slide long. All it does is lay out the number of lines, which is 14, the rhyme scheme, and the iambic pentameter part, which I'll talk a little bit about in a future announcement. We're not too concerned about that just yet. And this is for the Elizabethan or Shakespearean. So the Petrarchan is 14 lines, but the rhyme scheme works a little bit differently there. You'll also notice, especially across these various examples, that not every author, even Shakespeare sometimes, breaks the rules a little bit of the Shakespearean sonnet. So every single sonnet doesn't conform in every single line to an exact metrical or even rhyming pattern necessarily. So people break the rules all the time. Okay, so you're going to read all the sonnets here. They're obviously only 14 lines, so it's pretty quick. If one kind of is interesting to you or touches you, that's the one that you're going to use for this assignment. We're not going to write about it. We're not going to analyze it. You're going to have kind of a gut reaction to it, and then you're going to figure out a cool way to record yourself. You don't have to be literally on camera, but you are going to record a reading of whatever that favorite sonnet is from the list that we have in this unit. You can get kind of fancy with the video production. You can keep it low key. Try to do something that makes sense given the context or the content of the sonnet. So we don't just want like the barest bones blank screen exactly. We want something a little bit more going on. And of course, we're not Shakespearean actors, but you also don't just want to sit there and read the sonnet and record yourself. So maybe practice it or think about what the sonnet's about. Like, what is the speaker saying? What is the emotion that's being conveyed? And can you kind of like perform the sonnet in a way that makes sense? And then you'll have the opportunity here as you, when you post, to explain why you chose that particular sonnet. But you can also tell us like what are some of the strategies or techniques that you used in recording it that you felt made sense given like what you thought was going on in that sonnet. So like I say here, there's tons of different ways of doing this. Think about how you want to do it now so you're not scrambling at the last minute. And you can always reach out to me for any kind of technical help or guidance, and I'll certainly see what I can do. Sometimes just a matter of trial and error. So for the discussion board, then you want to post a link to either a video or like an audio clip here. YouTube or SoundCloud is the best way. If you've never done this stuff before, again, just let me know and I can walk you through it. It's actually pretty straightforward, especially given how, sort of flexible and smoothly mobile phones operate these days. So doing stuff like this is nowhere near as tech intensive as it might have been even 5 years ago, let alone 10, ancient history. Then, of course, we have the reply part. And I would only say here that, of course, you can talk about what the person has done in that recording, but we're not audio engineers. We're not Shakespearean actors. We're not video production experts. So we don't want to get too, like, movie critic about this thing. People are sort of putting themselves forth a little bit in these performances, so we want to be conscious of tone a little bit. All right, so actually a fairly straightforward unit, right? Some readings to do, all linked here. the sonnet PowerPoint that you can look at, but we'll actually use that a little bit more directly in our next unit, which is also about sonnets. And then more of that creative engagement with the piece of work rather than something that's overly analytical. Again, be in touch with me with questions or concerns, especially if you have some ideas technically wise, but you're just not sure how to proceed exactly. All right, I'll talk with everybody soon, hopefully when I don't sound quite as awful.